lovely to be back with you again today. This is week 4 of our Falling More Deeply in Love. And the chapters for this week are chapters 9, 10 and 11. So if you haven't read those yet, go and read those before you come and watch this video. And share beneath the video like what it is that you take that's fresh and what's new. So I wanted to share with you what resonated with me as I read through the chapter. So a few things really, actually, and this is quite a lot of reading this week, but a few things really landed for me. So really what I was first struck by was, what if it's our job to bring out the best or the worst in people? What if what we see in front of our eyes is a reflection of our own level of consciousness, right? What if we see, just that, right? So when we see our partner or our children behaving badly, that the reason it looks like they're behaving badly is only ever because of our low level of consciousness in that moment. Isn't that interesting? Now, a lot of people will hear that, and I have friends who have had this conversation with, they get very defensive and they're like, well, why is it always my fault? I'm fed up of women thinking it's always their fault, right? And it's not my fault, it's definitely his fault. And we can argue, I think I've talked about this in previous videos, but we can argue that that's how life works if we want to. But if we do, we'll just keep staying stuck. So this isn't a matter of fault or blame. This is a chance for us to see that whatever we see in front of our eyes comes from our experience of life, is a reflection of our own level of understanding, our own level of consciousness in that moment. So if we're feeling scared or insecure or grumpy or short-tempered, right, we'll see things that are not happening fast enough, right? We'll see irritating behavior. We'll see short-temperedness in the person in front of us, guaranteed, right? You will see not enough. We'll see bad behavior in front of our eyes because we are in a low state of mind. Now, what's really cool about this is if we start to see that people are not behaving as we want them to in the outside world, we no longer have to go change them, right? It's an invitation for us to wake back up to ourselves, to check back in and go, hang on a minute, what's my feeling right now in this moment? And I can guarantee you, if someone is doing something that irritates me, I'm in an irritated feeling. I'm in a low state of mind. And that's the only reason the behaving looks irritating. Now, if that was the only thing we saw from this whole program, I think that would be huge. But it's, to me, that turning it around, that what if we get to bring out the best in people? What if we're committed to a good feeling in our family and a good feeling in our relationship above anything else? Above being right, above getting other people to do what we think they need to do, above anything. Like, what if nothing in your relationship was worth giving away a good feeling for? Just a question for you to reflect on. Now, when I got to spend time with Dick in Bettinger earlier this year, or late last year, we had dinner together with his family. And there was such an amazing feeling in the room. So there were the grandchildren, there were Dickin's children, there were Dickin and his wife. So 3 generations of a family all sat around a table. And through the course of the evening, there would be people getting in a mood about something and then coming back to the table. There were people laughing about something, coming back to the table. There were people telling sad stories. There were people telling funny stories. There was a change in the experience going on all over the place in that room. But what I said to Dickin the next day was, like, there's such a feeling of love and connection in your family, like, that underlies all of the whatever's going on the surface. Tell me more about that, which Dickin loves to talk about. And he said, 22 years, Nick, 22 years of looking in this direction. And it suddenly brought it home to me. He said, like, we have a closer connection in our family now than we did this time a year ago. And the year before that, and the year before that, and the year before that. So there's something magical that happens when you continue to look in this direction and you allow that to unfold. And as you see deeper and deeper and deeper, that connection and that feeling of love grows. in that feeling, the best was brought out in everybody in that room. Like the best was being brought out in the grandchildren. The best was being brought out when someone would get in a mood, they came back to the table again very quickly. Like they bounced out, they got over themselves, as George would say, very quickly, and came back into the room. You know, when people were sad, they were met with love. And it just allowed me to see that, no, the feeling is the most important thing in that family. Whether the kids are aware of that, whether other people are aware of that, like as a thing, I don't know. But when you sit with Dickon, you know that love is his primary consideration anyway. And bringing that into his family brought out the best in his family. So what if, in order for us to have the best relationships possible with the people that we love, that we put love and a commitment to a good feeling above anything and everything else? Now, that doesn't mean being a doormat. What it means is that, so George talks in these chapters about the goodwill spiral, right? So to my mind, it's like we start feeling insecure, and so we see bad behavior, and then we get insecure and cross about that, and then we see more of the bad behavior, and then we decide to take it up with the other person, and then there's a clashing of egos, and then there's a like, I'm right, no, I'm right, and then it gets into a spat and a fight, and it never ends well, right? It's like a funnel of goodwill funneling away, right? Like that. And instead, in the opposite direction is like when we see, for me now, what I've caught wise to is as I know what the feeling of that funnel is. So very quickly and earlier, and ask me again in 22 years, right? I bet I'll pick it up quicker. But as the funnel starts to come in like that, there's a feeling to it. And more and more quickly, I'm like, I'm not interested. Like, okay, let's stop. Let's come back to this later, right? I'm not interested in the deep dive into the bottom of the funnel. I pick it up quicker. And what happens is when I drop it, I can feel this is going nowhere. I feel like I'm right and you're wrong, right? That's a really clear sign that you're heading this way. Then when I drop that, I fall back into a space of openness. I fall back into a space of love and understanding. I have time. When I have time, my mind clears, and the love that's the priority rises to the surface again. It always does. And if I just give it time for that to show itself, I'm not a doormat, because I can go and say anything to my husband in a good feeling and it will get heard. And I can say the same words in the downward funnel and it will get fought with. Right? Because here there's separation, there's difference, there's limitation, there's right and wrong, there's a me and a you, separate. And here there's a connection and a love and an openness and a connection with, as George says, the wisdom underneath the personality, right? So you've got the egos clashing with the difference of opinion, and then underneath that you've got like the wisdom and the common sense and the love that's underneath in every single one of the discussions that he has through the chapters. It's like, everyone wants the kid to do well at school, right? Everyone wants these couples to have this close relationship. Everyone wants their kids to pull their weight in the house, right? Underneath that, there's a love and there's a joint. In NLP, you kind of used to call it chunking up, right? Like when you chunk up enough, everyone's got something that they agree on, right? At a higher level. But it's in this context, it's like underneath, there is an underlying, everyone is love and everyone is love underneath all of that. And if you look for it, you will find that in everything. When you've calmed down out of your own thinking enough, you'll see it in every conversation with your children, every conversation with your loved one, that everyone is doing the best they can given the thinking that looks real to them in the moment. And that underneath all of that, we all hear the calling back to love, and that's where we're trying to get to. So it might be that someone's, I don't know, like sitting watching TV all day and that's really annoying to you, right? But actually that person is seeking peace of mind and well-being. perhaps, right, in their behavior. And that's the best way they know how right now to get that, because I think it comes from outside of themselves. I think it comes from having more rest. It comes from watching hours of Netflix. And my goodness, that's looked true to me as well, right? But if I believe that that's true, I'm going to behave accordingly. Now, I can think you're being lazy, you're being slack, you're not pulling your weight, it's always up to me, I'm a martyr, but I need to have a word with you about this, we need to sit down, we need to have a conversation. Or I can see that underlying everyone's behavior, human beings are these peace-seeking missiles. They're just trying to get back home. And if that looks like watching TV and binging on Netflix, or it looks like going out after work every night, or it looks like having an argument with the kids, because if they would behave better, then we could all get back to peace, quiet and well-being. I see the innocence in it. I see me too all the time. I slip up and I forget where well-being comes from. But I know that we're all drawn to that because it's our nature and we know it. And so we have this calling back to it all of the time. The calling back to our true nature is like a magnet. And we respond to that call in the best way we know how, given our level of understanding, given our access to that level of understanding in the moment, our level of consciousness, our knowing about how life works, will be demonstrated in how we respond to that call back home. And when we see that everyone is just trying to get back home, right? Everyone's responding to that call back home. We get less hung up on the form of what that looks like. So when George talks about the personality versus personality, right? That's the form of how we try and get back home, if you like, in this context. And underneath that, there's a deeper wisdom and connection. So we know, we resonate with, we can understand this call back home, because us too. When we can connect in with that, when we fall out of all the busy thinking about our own, who's right, who's wrong, all the rest of it, there is just that. There's a beautiful oneness underneath all of the separation created through thought. Now, I know what it feels like to sit in a knowing of that. I know what it feels like to be filled up with love. So does every single one of you watching this video. Now, I want to be in that space and then respond to my relationship. And if I'm not in that space, I muddle along the best I know how in that moment, right? But as much as possible, I'm not interested in interacting in my relationship as it's channeling down here, right? I'm interested in taking a step back, reflecting, change of heart, George calls it. Right? So if I'm fighting and right, it calls for a change of heart, and that's possible at any moment, out of the blue, total surprise, nothing you can do to make that happen, but if you know that it's possible. So I want to share with you one example where my husband had gone to work. This was about 2 or 3 years ago now, but it still really sticks with me because it was one of those turning points in my life of my understanding of the principles. And he'd gone to work and I was really cross with him about something, and I can't remember what it was, right? It's not important. But I was really cross, I was really upset, I was really angry, I was probably running the divorce movie in my head about how this couldn't possibly go on, it couldn't continue like this anymore, that it means this about me, it means this about him, it means this about our relationships, it means this about our life, about our family, the future is this, the past is this. Really, really, really upset, like really full of anger towards him, and, you know, total separation and conflict in my mind. And I remember where I was, you know, these big insights where you remember where you were sitting. I remember I was sitting in the kitchen looking at the wall, and all of a sudden, from nowhere, I had this change of heart. I just fell back into love through no doing of my own. I fell back into love, and I filled up with love, and I just fell in love with him. Now, nothing had changed. Nothing had changed. He hadn't called me. He hadn't done anything different. I was sat on the same chair, and 1 minute there was hatred and anger, and the next minute there was love and compassion. And nothing changed apart from a shift in consciousness. Nothing changed. And for me, that was such a huge realization that what's going on in the world, like circumstance, does not create a feeling of well-being, but that sits within every one of us at all times. That for me was one of those turning points where I really saw, oh, it doesn't work outside in. This is an inside out job. My husband's behavior hadn't changed, but my feeling towards him in a heartbeat. Nothing I did to have that happen. Now, I've seen that for myself. I've seen that that's possible. And so when George says in the chapters, like, we start to see how the insight process works. So it's a very technical term for it. But when we know that change happens through insight, we look there for a change in our relationship, not in changing our partner or working on our relationship in order to fall back in love. We start seeing that a change of heart is possible when you least expect it. If we just put down our attempts to fix our relationship or adjust for our experience or manipulate our lives in the external world to some degree, like to whatever degree that we're trying to in order to have a better relationship. I mean, I wasn't even trying to do any of those things. I was totally fired up in my mind trying to figure out how to change and what needed to happen to change this situation. But to know that something left field can come in, give us a change of heart, and everything's different, to me, that's so hopeful in relationships. And to me, I want you guys to know that that's possible. And I want you to see and just reflect on where that's happened for you in your own life at some point. It might be with a job or a painting or a drink that you hated and now you like, or where all of a sudden, for no reason at all, something you loved you now really dislike, or something you dislike you now find that you have all the time. You didn't do anything to make that happen. I used to love coffee and then I hated coffee for a while and now I love coffee again. Now I didn't do that. I had a change of heart for some reason. But that change of heart and the falling back into love is always, 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 always possible. And that's where I want to look for a more loving relationship. That's where I want to look when I want to fall more deeply in love. I want to fall out of trying to manipulate things in the form and falling more deeply into love is just a knowing of our true nature, because that's what we're made of. That's what they're made of. That's what life is made of. It's seeing what's already there. There's not more love here that needs to be created. It's already there. It's our very essence. And that's kind of what I took from this chapter. But enough about me. I want to hear what you're hearing here. And obviously bring your questions to the Q&A calls. I love to talk about this with you. And I'd be also really curious to see, like, as you're following along with this video series, do you find yourself falling more deeply in love? I do, personally. I do. And that's really cool as well. And you might not, and we're only 4 weeks in. But hopefully this has given you something to get curious about, questions for you to reflect on. And I know that this love into which we fall is bottomless and endless. There's no end to it. No matter how much you're already deeply in love, there's an even deeper level on offer. Very cool. Right, I'll be back with you again next week.